What's an unsolved mystery that you find yourself thinking about regularly? Local ones. Heidi Seaman, a girl my age who disappeared walking home from a birthday party. Erica Bateo, who disappeared the same year. Lena Sardar Keel, daughter of refugees, who disappeared from an apartment complex playground just a few years ago. But mostly Lupita Cantu, whose case showcases such stunning police incompetence and sexism I am still aghast. In short, she was kidnapped and murdered, but because she was seen driving her minivan with her presumed abductor, police decided she had simply run off and refused to investigate any further. Her body was actually found in a neighboring town 3 weeks later, obviously a homicide victim, brought back to San Antonio for an autopsy, but not identified because, again, she wasn't considered a missing person by the police. She was ultimately buried in a pauper's grave, unidentified for 20 years, and when her identity was eventually pieced together, they exhumed her. And there was a man in the grave, not Lupita. They simply misplaced her. There's exactly zero chance her murder will ever be solved because of all of this, and I remain angry for her family. Street. Louis Little Doe. First, for anyone who does not know the case, in 1983, some men went into an abandoned building looking for scrap metal. One of them lit up a lighter to see in the dark and noticed a beheaded body on the ground. When the police arrived, they initially believed it could have been a prostitute, but upon turning the body over, they realized that the girl had not gone through puberty yet and was just a child. She was bound and wearing a yellow sweater. After investigating for a while and coming up with no leads, the police sent the sweater and the rope to a psychic in Florida, and it was supposedly lost in the mail. The case remains cold to this day with no new leads. Shergar, a famous and successful British racehorse in the 80s, was stolen from his stud farm, and a ransom of €2 million was demanded. His final photo sent by the thieves is out there on the internet somewhere, and it's quite unsettling. You can see that he's terrified in the photo. The ransom was not paid, negotiations came to a halt, and the horse was never seen again. It's obviously assumed he was killed in the end, but much of the story remains a mystery. When I was 4, my older sister and cousin were supposed to watch me while Dad worked in his office. They got distracted pinching each other, and I wandered off. From my dad's paw, he came out of his office to check on us, and right at that moment, I came walking down the hallway to them with a confused expression on my face. Meanwhile, they were horrified and panicked because I somehow nicked a vessel just above my collarbone and was bleeding out. I wasn't crying, I didn't feel pain, I was just confused. There was no sound indicating what might have happened. The only thing I remember is being swaddled in a mountain of blankets, put in the back of the car, and watching the scenery outside the car window zoom by before blacking out. We still have no idea what happened. Sophie Toscan du Plantier, a French filmmaker murdered in West Cork, Ireland. The primary suspect just died in January, still saying he didn't do it. And the local police had botched the investigation so horribly that there's a giant, reasonable doubt, hole in the case. I feel awful for all families of unsolved crimes. Not that knowing would necessarily make grief any easier, but all the unknowns seem to be an extra layer of pain. Stephen Douglas Reed. We went to college together and were friends in the sense that he didn't really have friends, but we hung out with the same group of people. In 1999, 2 years into medical school, he bought a $100,000 life insurance policy, named his parents as beneficiaries, flew to Portland to go hiking, walked into the wilderness, and was never found, seen, or heard from again. The thing is, I don't know a single person who knew Steve who believes he died in the wilderness. We all believe he disappeared to change his identity. He's probably the only person I've ever known who was smart enough to pull it off. I truly wonder what happened to him. When I was very little in rural Missouri, we lived down the road from a nice old man I only ever knew as Mr. Jones. He had horses and an old wagon he used to take my mom and me on rides with. One evening, he was sitting on the front porch with my dad, and we heard him say, "If I ever up and disappear, don't bother looking for me, I'm probably at the bottom of a pond." My timeline is unclear because I was only 5 or 6, but Mr. Jones did go missing soon after. And I don't think he was ever found, or even a big fuss made about it. His house was on the way to my grandmother's, so I watched his empty old place crumble and be taken over by nature as I grew up. Another wild backwoods story. We used to leave our house unlocked when we went to my grandma's, because that was apparently just a thing you did in the 80s. For a while, whenever we came home, our VCR would be on, the ceiling fan would be on, and the little black and white TV in my parents' bedroom would be moved to the bathroom counter. It finally creeped my mom out enough that we started locking the front door. No more issues. We lived in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by woods, and knew all our distant neighbors. Who the hell was chilling in our house while we weren't home? It wasn't national news, but having met the parents of the victim, I think about it quite often. Bambi Lynn Dick of Davenport, Iowa, went to a Quiet Riot concert in 1983. Her mother believed her friends she went to the show with knew something. In 2009, a body was matched which had been a Jane Doe in Texas. Her mother died shortly after telling me about this. Her father died a few years later. This is pretty much all we know about it. There are so many questions that her parents had for the rest of their lives, questions her brother still has, questions that haunt me even though my relation to the case is minimal. The murder of Kevin Kluwer. Kevin is family on my mother's side. In March 2004, Kevin went to a nightclub with one of his friends and met a stranger called Fernando. Kevin and Fernando seemed to have some chemistry and went somewhere together. Kevin's friend never saw him again. The next day, Kevin didn't turn up to work, so his father went to his apartment to check up on him. Kevin's car was parked outside, but when Kevin did not open the door, his father forced his way in. Jim found Kevin in his bedroom. He had been stabbed in the back 42 times. Even though Kevin's killer left forensic evidence, and there are eyewitness descriptions of Fernando, the police have never located him, and no arrests have been made in Kevin's case. Sadly, Kevin's parents both passed away the following year. It's almost 20 years since Kevin was killed, and while there have been some leads, his killer has never been found. Not a murder nor a morose mystery for a change. I always wonder if Fermat really had a proof for his famous last theorem, and if so, was it logically correct? And if so, was it simpler than Andrew Wiles and Richard Taylor's proof? Or did Fermat just fool himself into believing he had a working proof when it was, in fact, flawed? Or was he just drunk when he scribbled on the margin of his notebook and had no proof? Not entirely unsolved, but more that there are very reasonable explanations that we will just never have confirmed because of the circumstances. The Roanoke colony in the early colonization of the Americas seemingly up and disappeared one day, with no signs of violence and many of the personal effects of the people in the colony left undisturbed, as if every person there had all vanished within a moment all at once. No sign that anything at all had happened except for a word carved into a tree. At the location that suggested they had fled to a nearby settlement, although they were never found. Now, of course, there are reasonable explanations for this. Perhaps the colony was raided by the natives who managed to round up the colonizers without leaving any signs of violence. Perhaps the colony had to evacuate suddenly due to predators in the area, lack of resources, or other reasons, and the people all settled elsewhere and never returned, but it seems odd so many people would leave so many of their belongings behind. The Yost family murder in Central Texas in 1990. I lived in the adjoining neighborhood and went to the same school as one of the kids. One theory is it was murder-suicide by the dad, but there were some things that didn't add up. If I recall correctly, gunpowder was on his non-dominant hand, and there was evidence that the carpet was vacuumed to cover up footprints. There were rumors that the dad had information about corruption in the Texas Racing Commission and was about to go public with the information. I also heard rumors of organized crime. I think about it a lot because it happened when I was pretty young and it was so nearby. The missing persons case of Brandon Sanderson. Young, nice teenager driving home from a party in rural Minnesota and runs into a ditch. Calls his parents and stays on the phone for 45+ minutes while he walks towards a town to meet them. He sounds 100% confident he knows where he is based on the lights of the town in the distance. Then all of a sudden he yells, "Oh shit," and goes silent on the phone, but the call doesn't drop. Never seen or heard from him again, but it turns out he was way off track geographically and his car was in a very bizarre position on a very bizarre dirt side road. The most reasonable explanation is that he fell into a river, lost his phone, crawled out, and died in a field where he was run over by a combine harvester. But there are strange inconsistencies and coincidences all over. Why the car doors were left open, why he was on these weird gravel roads to begin with, why he was so incredibly off in his navigation, why he was so confident that he spotted the town of Lind, why he walked off the road onto a side trail, why the gravel was graded almost immediately, why the phone didn't end up in a river, etc. Honestly, just ghosts and the afterlife in general. A ton of cultures have ancestors, spirits, guides, ghosts, and then angry or stuck versions of those too. Too many people throughout history from different religions, different races, different genders, different financial backgrounds, different countries, you name it, have seen them, and seen the afterlife during accidents, and seen their relatives appear in front of them right before they die. In fact, I hear it's not only a thing but a pretty common occurrence in hospice to have people see their family coming for them. As much as I don't know if I believe all the stories about scary ghosts that go boo in the night, it seems implausible to write off all of it as superstitions. There are some explanations, like carbon monoxide, alcohol, drugs, anything that can alter or impair you can lead you to see things, including death or the fear of death. But that being said, people who are perfectly healthy can also see ghosts. I don't know, it almost seems more likely to me that there is something. And if there is, it would bring into question the entire principle of physics and science as we know it, and put questions about gods up into the conversation. Just a lot to think about, so I think about it often. I've got another one. Where the hell did all those missing nukes go that people have lost over the years? I know some are speculated to be in the oceans, another on top of a snowy mountain, but I can't remember which one. We just won't know until they pop. Scary stuff. Thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on the best Reddit stories.